Hello and welcome to another edition of Luminar Coffee Break. I'm your host, Vanelli. Now joining me today is my co-host, Angela Andrieux. Hello, Angela.
Hey everyone, happy Friday.
Good. So Angela, what do we have for today?
So today is our weekly recap where we go back over the topics that we discussed earlier in the week. And Vanelli is going to be talking about how to create natural looking portraits and how to do a convincing sky replacement. Now, I ended up jumping in for him on Thursday with that topic because he had a scheduling conflict. So you'll get the benefit today of seeing two different interpretations, how I did it, and we'll see how he did it as well. And then the topics that you and I covered this week were how to choose the best crop for your image and how to remove stubborn chromatic aberrations.
Well, that's
So
awesome.
Vanelli, do you want to go ahead and start with portraits?
Yep, I'll jump in. But it was funny because after I saw what you did to that, I was like, oh man. I loved what you did with the sky replacement. So we'll go through that in a second. What I do have to do is queue up the video. So how about we do this, Angela? Do you mind showing the sky replacement first?
Sure, we can do that, or I can jump into the crop.
Oh,
choosing the best crop. Let me go ahead and do that one because I have that already lined up.
Great. I'm so sorry about that. Now, and I'm going to queue up the video. I had the video. I just want to double check to make sure I had the video all set. So let's jump right in. I'm sharing your screen.
All right.
There's your screen.
There we go. Yep, it's up there. So what we have up on the screen right now is a couple of primates. This was captured by one of our ambassadors. And I did a very, very minimal edit to this image. All I did was adjust the white balance. So here's the before. You can see it had an awful kind of blue tone to it. All I did was I went into edit. Go ahead and let that load up. I went into the light tool, grabbed that white balance eyedropper, and I figured the place that in this image that had the closest thing to a neutral gray was going to be the beard of the monkey. So I went ahead and used that to sample. It corrected the white balance, and that did great. So that takes us into let's work on the composition and crop. So there's a lot of different factors you can consider when you're cropping an image and composing an image in camera. In the episode earlier this week, we went through a couple of different articles that I'd found. I had shared those links in the chat for that episode. So hopefully you got a chance to go and look at those. We talked about the rule of thirds. We talked about the golden ratio. We talked about the rule of odds. And all of these rules are really just guidelines. You want to find what works best for your image. So for instance, in this image, we have two monkeys. The rule of odds obviously can't apply here. You don't always have the option to put three objects into an image, but it works here with the pair of monkeys. So don't feel like you have to always follow those rules, but they're good things to keep in mind. Another one that another rule that is broken in this image is that in most of the world we read top to bottom and left to right. So when you take an image, a lot of times it feels good to have your subject looking to the right. Having subjects looking to the left feels a little bit awkward. Now, one thing we can try when that happens is I can go into Composition AI and we can flip that image to see if that feels better and feels more natural. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. For this particular photo, I didn't really like it, but I wanted to make sure you knew that that option was there in case you wanted to give it a try. We also looked at trying Composition AI with this image, seeing what the computer would recommend for us for a crop. We tried a square, we tried a few different things, and that 16:9 is what we finally landed on because it took out a lot of this extraneous detail along the top and the right. It put our primates here right on the rule of thirds. So we have on this line here, you can see my mouse is moving, and they nicely sit in that frame. It gives them room to look out of the image. And by cropping off the very top of this main branch, it minimizes how it would take you out of the image. So your eyes tend to follow lines in an image. And when this was full frame, let me go ahead and reset this so you can see. It has a tendency to take your eye and take you right out up the top of the image. By cropping that down, bringing us in a little bit closer to our subjects, that's no longer really an issue for me. So I hope those give you some good tips on how to crop and compose your images, both when you're out in the field and when you're in post-processing.
I loved it, Angela. That looked great. And by the way, at the bottom of your screen, it has that share icon again.
Oh, it does, doesn't it? Let me go ahead and get rid of that.
Well, that's good. So a few people are jumping on board. Robert Boyer, let's get this party started. Hello, everyone. Yes, happy Friday. But it's funny, Angela, because you did this same tutorial for insiders. And
Correct.
somebody made a comment how much they loved the flipping in the crop.
Yes.
And there's something, you forget it's there, and then when you need it, it's like, wow, that is so cool. So
Yeah,
awesome
it can really do a lot of great things for certain images when it doesn't feel quite right. If you have your subjects looking the wrong way, and they feel blocked and they don't have room to move, that can really kind of open it up in an unexpected way.
Awesome. All right. So now what we're going to do is I'm going to show you a video. And Angela and I joked about this, that I feel like that school teacher that shows videos in the class. No, I want to show you the video that Dan and Shell did on how they got the pose, or how they got these couples the pose the way they did. And you've seen these images. We've used them several times. So let me cue up the video. So watch close on how they interact with the couple.
Another thing that we really like to do, whether we're shooting ourselves or whether we're shooting couples, is create some sort of movement. Rather than doing just a set in place pose, we like to have our couples or ourselves moving and with the photo, because what it does is it really creates authentic smiles, because sometimes they're like funny movements that we will have them do and they will just burst into laughter, and that's when you get that real genuine photo that you're going to put on your wall.
So some of the ones that she has us do or has her couples do, they're kind of ridiculous. Like they look kind of ridiculous in real life, but in the photo it's totally fine and natural. Like we were doing the airplane earlier. Yeah, it looks good in a photo, trust us. We also have
gold.
Other ones like the drunk walk where you just slam into each other. And it's just fun. It makes it so much more fun for the couple, and we get better photos out of it, they get better photos out of it, so all around win, win, win.
Well, guys, so that was Dan and Shell. What I want to do is I want to show you the images that they took from that video. Now, here we are. Here's the original, and here's real quick edit to it. But let me show you the actual image. So let me do this. I'm going to go to the images from the library itself. So let's start now. I'm looking, and when I looked at the camera raw data, he shot this with a 50 millimeter lens. 50 millimeter, so that meant that they were very close to the subject, and it was at f1.8. 1.8. Look at this. Oh, that's a bad example. We'll use this one. I'm trying to get their eyes as an example right here. So at shooting at 1.8, let's give it a second to render. Look how tack sharp. Look at that. I mean, that's not that easy to do, but because they're at a distance, and notice they're shooting very, very wide, so there's a lot of areas to this they'd have to crop to get the image looking good. But at 1.8, look at the shallow depth of field that they achieved, and they got the couple to get into the routine. Now, if you notice, they started back here. Let's say here. This is not a good shot. They're disengaged. Still disengaged. They're not together. They're two. This doesn't show intimacy. Now it's getting there. Still not perfect, but it's there. Too far away, too far away. Great shot. Ooh, look at this. Now they're getting into it. Boom. That right there is a moneymaker. I'm going to hit P, which I did, is one of the favorites. That's another one. 2, 3. It's rendering. 4, 5. And we're back to being further away again. So they got a good set, a good burst of shots. Now, I would crop this probably right in here, and then we can apply the different effects that we want to it. But the key, what I'm trying to get at is to make them look natural, you have to do unnatural type poses with it. And a lot of times, like I love children, and I love working with kids. A lot of times I'll talk to the child and I'll make a funny joke like, hey, how come you've never seen an elephant in a tree? And the little kid will say something like, well, they're too big to climb a tree. And I'll say, no, it's because they hide really, really well. They're like, what? I go, yeah, look, over there. There's an elephant in a tree. And they look back, they start laughing. That's when you get the shot. And you make that part of the routine. Now, if you're not that type of a photographer that feels comfortable, doing jokes or making themselves look foolish, do something that you feel will relax the couple. But look how relaxed these two right here look. And again, we did natural, we how do I put this? We did unnatural drills like the airplane stuff, or the drunken walk. It's all unnatural to get a natural looking pose. So those are just some tips, Angela, that we were working on.
Those are such wonderful tips, especially for somebody who's just getting started with portrait photography and unsure how to pose people and how to work with people. I mean, I know that portrait photography is, so those are definitely things I could put to work when I go out and, next time somebody asks me to take pictures of them. So that's a lot of fun. And I want to kind of throw in there. So I run a camera club and we do these monthly critiques. We had one earlier this week where one of my members submitted this image, and it was from a posed portrait shoot. But the one that he submitted was kind of an outtake. The woman had her head thrown back in laughter, and it was one of those perfectly genuine moments. And those are the ones that really stand out and talk to people. Not necessarily the posed perfect shots. It's the one where somebody's expressing true emotion. And he was asked by our judge what he did. He's like, oh, I probably told some sort of off-color joke. But it's just those little moments, those true human interactions, and those genuine responses that really can make an amazing portrait.
Well, that's awesome. All right, Angela. So what do you have for us now?
All right, well, let's go ahead and do some of that sky replacement, because I just had so much fun doing this one and jumping in for Vanelli at the last minute and finding a sky that worked really well with this image. So I had access to the same raw image that he was working with, but I did a completely different take than what he did. So here's the before, and it's a beautiful shot, but it's a little flat. The shadows are dark. I went in and I really brought it to life with this gorgeous, colorful sunset. And the thing that really makes this work is that we have warm tones up here matching the warm tones that are on this hillside, and that the light is coming in from the proper direction. So you'll see up here on the mountainside, we have the light hitting those rocks, and you can see very easily what the direction of the light is. If you pick the wrong sky and that direction of light doesn't match, it's a dead giveaway that you chose the wrong sky, and it's going to look fake. So that's one of the things I look for. I also did my little magic bit with the sun rays to really match that light. So if I go back up here to my tools, let's take a look at first our sky settings and what I did here. So I'm going to see, I added some warmth to that sky. I brought down the exposure a little bit. Otherwise, I didn't have to do a whole lot. One other thing to pay attention to and to watch for as you're doing a sky replacement to make sure it looks good is pay attention to your depth of field. In a landscape photo like this, where we have a very deep depth of field, everything is pretty well in focus from front to back. You can have a pretty sharp sky and it'll look just right. However, you have a shallow depth of field and all of the detail is falling off behind your subject. You want to make sure that sky blends with that, and this is where sky defocus comes in really handy. I didn't need to use it here. That's definitely one you want to keep in your toolbox for those instances where it makes it fit. Now, my little secret here to really make that light blend was to use sun rays. So let me go ahead and just turn that off and then back on, and it's ever so subtle. And when I use sun rays, the key for me is I don't want people to know that I use the sun rays, but it just emphasizes that direction of the light and that warmth of the light. And I used the warmth setting down here at the bottom and pulled the warmth up of just the sun rays. The sun center, if I click on place sun center, you'll notice it's off of my canvas. So that way the light is just coming in from that left-hand side, sweeping across this mountain and hitting the opposite mountainside. What do you think, Vanelli?
I love it. So I'm going to show you mine, but I'm going to go to a little bit different because she did a phenomenal job showing you how she did the sky replacement. What I'm going to do is I'm going to also show you what tools or what settings in the sky replacement you could use. Before I do that, let's check out some of the comments. You know, Robert is mentioning he has an older Mac, a 2013, and he feels he's just not cutting it. And the rest of everyone else is saying hi. Now, the reason why I showed you that is I want to show you inside Luminar the user manual. So here we go. So I'm here. This was my take on my image that Angela did. Yours looks, like you said, more of a sunset, correct, Angela?
Correct. Or sunrise. It could be either one. Yeah,
I love yours for this. It looks like a beautiful sunset. Mine's coming in as a sunrise because more of the blues in it. But let's come over here, help, and you click on that user guide. And when you do, boom, here's where we're at. So to help Robert real quick before I get into the sky replacement, requirements. So if you type in requirements, it'll show you this is the minimum requirements for Windows and the minimum requirements for a Mac. So you said you have a 2013. So here's 2010. The key here is check how many gigs of RAM you have. 8 gigs minimum, 16 is recommended.
You know, as a fellow Mac user, I want to interject in that if you have a Mac of that vintage, it is pretty easy if you to have the RAM increased. On the newer Macs, the RAM is soldered to the motherboard and is very difficult for an individual to do. You have to send it off. It's not a simple or inexpensive thing. With some of the older Macs, especially if you're on a laptop, you can go ahead and put more RAM in there, and you might be able to breathe a little bit of extra life into your computer.
Yes, so maybe that's an alternative way, Rob, to save a little extra money until you get the one that you want. All right?
Exactly.
All right, so that's that. Now, let me get to sky replacement. And just out of curiosity, for those tuning in, let me know in the comments, are you using the user manual? Here's how the sky replacement guidelines. So this actually shows you how to take photos of your own sky. But what we're working on right now is each of these tools, or each of these settings, I should say. So a couple things. And this is where people are having issues on the Sky Global and Sky Local. What's the difference? All right. So that's the biggest key I'm noticing for the Sky Global. Think global, the entire photo. Now this slider is going to affect the texture. Keyword, the texture, which is mixing into the scene. All right. So if you have a sky replacement, it's the texture of that sky replacement that you're mixing in. Now down here, Sky Local is used to control the overlapping of the new sky, all right, with the original cloud. So that is going to influence how much of the original clouds are replaced. Now let's see that in action real quick. So if I'm here, let me zoom right in. There we go. All right, so here we are, and I want to get to the sky replacement tool. All right, now, and clicking on advance. So here's the close gap, for example. I'm going to bring that all the way down, and when I bring it down, notice up here, it's still rendering. Look what it did. It's closing the gap. Well, look how far it brought the gap. So it's not closing any of the gap. If I crank it up, now notice it's going to fit nice and behind the rocks. Well, this is where Sky Local and we talked about Sky Global comes into play. When I bring this back, right, notice the textures. Look at this. So the original cloud, look at that. The original clouds are coming through. The texture of the cloud. If this were a pure blue, if the original cloud's background was pure blue, nothing would come through. This Sky Global is allowing for some of the clouds that were in the original image to come through. Well, if you don't want that, crank that up as much as you can to get rid of it. Here's Sky Local. When I bring it way down, give it time to render. This right here is showing how it's mixing in. So I want to crank it up. And look how it's blending the textures. All right? And then we talked about this also, Angela, where you could flip the sky. Now, if the point, like right here we see is the light source, this will look totally fake. Because if here's what's being lit, is it bouncing off of the rock and coming in? You know, so that would look fake. So therefore, you make sure that you turn it and it's actually showing the light source. So, but like I said, this is where if you start to wonder what are these tools doing or these settings, go to the tool inside the user manual and then read it close, go back to what you're doing, make adjustments and say, now it makes sense. Because you may run into an issue to where you've tried everything and you just can't get the sky off of here. That's when you fall back to the masking, to where you paint away what you don't want. Try the best that you can to use that as a last resort. It's there in case you need it, but try not to use it. All right? So, Angela, what'd you think of that?
I think it was really great. And like I said, I appreciate your different take on it, not only in the style that you chose to go with and, you know, totally different colors and hues, but that you went in and showed, you know, the user guide and where to find that information on each of those sliders, because that can get very confusing. And I find myself, even though I teach this on a day-to-day basis, I'm constantly referring back to that user guide. Especially when somebody asks me what exactly does this slider do, I'm always going back to that user guide and going, okay, this description says it so much better than I can, I would say 95% of the time. So awesome. Make sure you keep that in mind because it's such a wonderful resource.
Well, that's awesome. All right, Angela, what do you have left for us?
All right, so we talked about stubborn chromatic aberrations, and we've got this beautiful image. Let me go ahead and show you the before. All I did processing-wise here was add a template, and I went into, obviously, templates, and let me go back here, screen. I went down to this Essence collection, and I chose Rembrandt. Now, let me go ahead. I'm going to right-click on my image. We're going to just do a quick, complete re-edit of this. I'm going to go ahead and revert to original. There we go. And I'm going to go ahead and apply that Rembrandt template. So you can see it's basically what we did before. However, if I zoom in to, let's go ahead to 200% so you guys can really see it. Right over here, we've got some really bad chromatic aberrations happening. And the reason this is happening is because it's backlit. There's a couple of different reasons you can end up with chromatic aberrations. One is it can be a defect in the lens. It happens more often with less expensive, less expensive lenses than higher end ones, but it can happen in higher end lenses too. So it's not a given that you spend $2,000 on a lens and you won't have any more chromatic aberrations. The other time is when you have something that's very strong backlit and it's not actually a chromatic aberration, it's your light wrapping around the backside of that subject. Now, even though that may be the natural light, it doesn't look good and we want to get rid of it. So let's go ahead and go over into our edit tab. And the first place I want to go is down to the professional section and to optics. And we've got a handful of different options here. We're going to start with our remove chromatic aberrations and let that render. And you'll see it helps a little bit, but it doesn't get rid of them. If you go down into your advanced settings, we also have defringe. Defringe makes it even better, but it still doesn't get rid of it. So here's what you do when you have an instance like this where you just need to get rid of those. I'm going to go over into the local masking, go to add and basic. And I'm here in Paint Mask. And I want to go down to my saturation, and I want to pull that saturation down until that red disappears. Now, this is a global adjustment at this moment because I haven't painted anything, but I'm going to pull that down until that red is no longer visible. I might also grab my structure and pull a little bit of the detail off of those edges just to make my paint look a little bit less noticeable. I'm then going to pull down the opacity on my brush, make sure I have a very soft brush, and then I'll use the bracket keys on my keyboard, just very softly in and get rid of those red marks around the edges. And you can see a little bit kind of glowing there in that center. I might do a little bit more there. And I'll just keep going over them with a lower opacity brush until they're gone. And that pretty much cleans that up. I could get in there probably and get a little bit cleaner, but I mean, man, that takes care of it. And it takes that distraction out of that corner because, I mean, this is not a very important part of the picture, but those harsh red lines in an otherwise very soft and beautiful image, they just screamed at me and they were very, very distracting. Now they're gone, and now we can really focus on the subject. So what do you think about that, Vanelli?
That's awesome, Angela. I love that. And by the way, that's Angela's catchphrase. What do you think about that? So that's our new segue. You don't do it when you're eating with your husband. You're telling stories. So what do you think about that? So I'm noticing I'm doing it with my son.
If he's just zoned out, yeah, I probably will.
Gotcha. No, I love what you did there, and I loved how you brought that to the attention that it happens because the light's wrapping around. You know.
Yeah.
And,
it can be a lens defect, but that's not always what's causing it. I think the time that I had the most stubborn chromatic aberrations in an image was a sunset shot at a pier at the beach, and I had this horrible red fringe. And no matter what I did, it wouldn't go away. And I realized that's just the light coming around the edge of that pier piling. And I had to go find another creative way to get rid of it. And this is basically what I did.
Gotcha. Well, let's pull up the comments. We'll talk about our buddy Robert in a moment. But yeah, Julie was asking, will the erase tool work for it? Well, yes, but then you're erasing part of the image.
Yeah, I mean, you could erase those little pieces of the orchid stem that's there, but I'm not sure I'd want to. I think getting rid of the red fringe is better. And I mean, I don't think the erase tool would work well just on the fringe. You'd end up erasing part of the stem as well.
Gotcha. All right, and our buddy Robert brought up a good point. He said he took a photo today into the sky replacement, and it went all over the entire image. Like you can't identify the horizon. So, like when that stuff happens to you, Angela, what do you like to do?
Well, I would have to see the image first of all to kind of know what's going on. But my guess is that maybe there was a lot of snow in the scene, or not a lot of contrast, and maybe not a defined horizon. So I know over on Insiders, one of our members showed us a picture where we had a white flagpole on a snow-covered landscape, gray water in the background, and then a completely gray sky. And why wasn't the sky replacement working? Why were we getting clouds in the foreground? It's because there wasn't enough contrast for the AI to be able to tell where the horizon ended and where the scene began. So, I mean, without seeing the image, that's kind of my first. What about you, Vanelli? What do you think?
No, you're right. And that was something that I had to experiment with myself is, well, it's right here. I'll pull it up. Right here, you can use the positioning of the horizon. All right, so I'm going to go to an extreme, but look where it is here. It's off the scene, and here, let's bring it way down. I'm bringing it way down, but you can definitely tell it's landing on some of this stuff here. So you try positioning the horizon to see what that does, and then most importantly, check out like the closed gap, because like I showed you earlier, if I don't use closed gap, well then it doesn't know. Look what it's doing. It's putting that sky on top of the mountain. So when I use the show or close the gap, it takes all that into consideration. All right. Well, there we have it.
Cool.
All right, guys. Hey, Robert did say it was snow.
Yeah,
So
snow's a tricky one, and so are any kind of white building. I've had particular issues with lighthouses. You know, a white lighthouse sticking up into the sky, oh, suddenly it thinks it's a cloud and tries to cover it up. So it's one of those things you do have to work with and get a little bit creative once in a while.
gotcha.
I did want to mention, I mentioned a few minutes ago that we talked about that example from one of our members on Insiders. For those of you who don't know, Luminar AI Insiders is a separate community that we've created for owners of Luminar AI, and we hope you will join us there. It's at insiders.skylum.com, and it's a great place. You'll have access to chat with Vanelli and I, along with many people from the Skylum team and thousands and thousands of our users around the world. People are posting images, asking questions, sharing tips. It's a fabulous place. So we hope you'll join us at insiders.skylum.com.
Great. Yeah, and on there, there's also, other than videos and other than our morning coffee break or afternoon coffee break, we also post tutorials, not just from us, but from an entire group of professional photographers from all over the world. Not to mention the fact it's like the nice version of Facebook. You know, so you're dealing with like-minded people. You're not dealing with politics. You're not dealing with any of the garbages from the world. So in the martial arts, we used to say, when you first walk into the studio, you take your shoes off. And for two reasons. One, because when you step foot on the floor, you're barefoot. But we also said you leave the world behind you, and you're focusing now on what you're doing here. So if, God forbid, bad things happened while you walked into the studio, take those shoes off. And it's the same thing with Insiders. You know, when you get in there, it's your escape to be with like-minded people.
Yeah, you're just hanging out in the world of photography and people who love it. So I encourage you, if you haven't already joined, come see us there. I don't think you'll regret it.
No. Well, guys, thank you so much for joining us. And like we said, please leave comments below and give us a nice thumbs up. It makes the producers happy and cheerful. And if you have suggestions for future topics or things you want to learn, please let us know. Either email us at vanelli@skylum.com or angela@skylum.com and give us any suggestions that you would like to see in all of these episodes. Well, I'm Vanelli. Thank you so much for watching. We'll see you at the next coffee break.